Thank you very much, Wayne, for the opportunity to chat. I may finish up a little bit early and give some time back so we can catch up on schedule. And it's an honor to have this conversation with you all today. It's an honor to be here with some of the folks that have been speaking so far. Really appreciated some of the vulnerability I heard in the last session, especially from Dr. Mendoza, Williams. So as Wayne mentioned, I want to talk about, just for a few minutes, the unintended cost of code switching. And, a couple years ago, before George Floyd was murdered, and, we Black folks got to experience some increased freedoms to speak our truth openly, I was having a conversation with a wise Black woman about power. And in this conversation, this woman who I have grown to respect over the last few years and look up to, she was talking about that she had a front row seat to the civil rights movement. And then after that, worked in places of power in corporate America during all the other diversity, equity, inclusion movements of the last 30 years or so. And she started sharing with me and another person that happened to be there at that time about one of her passions in life that she'd really not been able to see through because her other work was pressing, and she just wasn't able to get to this particular project. And that passion that she shared was a desire to help up-and-coming Black and brown leaders understand how to navigate power and privilege. And she started telling us stories and sharing pictures of growing up in the South and then going off to a predominantly white college and having to learn the hard way how to climb up the ladder, not only as just a normal human, but as a Black woman. And since that conversation, I've been fascinated with this topic of how many of us in the Black community simply were not given tools or resources or the modeling that we needed to really achieve a high level of success. I was just watching the other day and looking at someone's commentary about many of the leaders that we look up to today and some of the folks that are leading the top tech companies and going to space and all that. And if you look at their history, they were actually handed things that allowed them to navigate power and privilege and get to the level that they're at now. But as we all know, many of us Black folks didn't have that. And just a few days ago, I was talking to a white colleague of mine, and this colleague expressed to me that the present challenges that I'm going through as a Black man in tech were literally a carbon copy of two other Black leaders around this colleague. And they told me that this exact thing. They said, you, Aaron, are an uber talented person. You and these other two people I'm thinking about have gotten to first base, and you easily stole second base because of your talent. Third base should be a given for you. You already did the hard work, but for some reason, the system is stopping you, and that's what needs to change. It's clearing that way so that people like you can continue on your journey towards greatness. And so just over the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about my experiences as a code switcher. Unfortunately, I haven't really figured out yet how to make my life easier because of this. I keep running into this problem. I have for a long time. But my hope is that if I share some of the things that I've went through and some of my thinking, that maybe it'll help someone that's just getting started on their journey towards greatness, and they can choose to take a different route than I did and maybe live more authentic and integrity, and one that people like myself have created a path for you before us. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, this term code switching is pretty prevalent. We've heard it a lot. It refers to the technique that a person uses to either survive or thrive in a situation or environment that really isn't safe for them. I'm sure you've all seen the viral videos of people speaking with a different tone of voice. One tone when they're doing a job interview and speaking, and another one when another tone when they're in the safety of their own homes. There's some really great scholarly articles that are tackling code switching. I suggest Googling the cost of code switching and then look for the Harvard Business Review article as a starting point. It's the one that talks about President Obama meeting the U.S. Olympic basketball team, and then he goes to shake the white coach's hand in a business way. And then he goes over to Kevin Durant the way that, well, you know how we black men greet each other when we see each other. It's a great meme of our time. But for me specifically, I'm drilling down on how myself and other black folks like me, we've learned to code switch to the point of actually assimilating to the dominant white culture that we live in. And I'd say for the most, if not all, it starts off as a survival technique. For some reason, we had to do this in order to survive. For me, I was raised in a predominantly white community. Even though I was in the South, at the heart of the civil rights movement, it was literally at my back door. I used to play under the Edmund Pettus Bridge as a child. Whiteness was presented to me as the goal. It is what I was supposed to achieve. It was never spoken out loud to me, but looking back, I can see that that was the intent. Now, I understand survival had merit. It was the late 80s, early 90s. We had Ronald Reagan as president, and we had George Bush in office, and all that came alongside of that. That was a long 12 years. But that shaped how I saw the world for a long time after that. Now, I'll say that I'm no longer shocked when I talk to a black person, especially a leader, that has found themselves navigating white spaces, and they express to me the fact that the trauma that they carried as a child impacted most days of their lives. I heard the previous speakers talking about this, that even though that we're in these places of leadership and even helping other people, we don't escape the trauma that we carried with us or brought with us as a child. And if you've ever been to therapy, you know that childhood trauma is often at the root of most of our adult mental challenges. So when you see an adult black person, you know, it's not absurd to imagine that what we're carrying right now, that trauma is associated with a life of oppression and hardship rooted probably in childhood. And so I think the main consequence of learning how to code switch effectively, like many of us have to do in the tech or startup or entrepreneur space, is that we push off processing our pain. Our therapists will tell us that when you push off pain, it simply takes something that you're supposed to deal with and grieve and move through, and you're just kicking it down the curb. No one really tells us that this is going to be the case when we're pushing off this pain. We're just told to be better, to do better, to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and just to work harder. And, you know, black folks often do more with less. We often just do what we're told. We often just continue working harder because we have to. But what happens when we keep doing that and then we show some signs of humanity and maybe make a mistake or maybe have to step down? Just this week, we're watching some of our most amazing black leaders like Simone Biles and before that Naomi Osaka prioritize their mental health over the demands of fans and endorsers and people paying their bills. Thankfully, these two women are at the top of their careers, and hopefully they've been able to buffer themselves from the mental abuse that normally comes with showing humanity. But let's bring this home to the world of tech and startups and entrepreneurship. Just think for a minute about all the serial entrepreneurs that you've seen. They'll start a company or they'll raise money, and then they'll make an intentional decision to close the business or fail to meet their investor expectations. Now, when that person happens to be white, not much happens. They send an email, they write a blog post, and then they move on to the next venture, and it's okay. Now, I think in the back of their minds, when they're building that business or that initiative, they have the mental freedom of knowing that it'll be okay to fail so that they can take some risk. But I don't know any, and maybe there are some, but I don't know any of them, any black folks that freedom to start and fail, even just a little bit. And that pressure we feel creates unintended stress and pressure on our lives consistently. So, like I said earlier, if you find yourself in a similar situation and you're later on in your life, I'm not really sure how to help you. I'm still learning how to shift from a life of code switching and assimilation to one of authenticity and integrity and living as an individual black man. So check back with me in a few years and I can probably tell you what I've learned. But for those of you that are coming up behind some of us leaders now, and you're looking at the world in front of you, trying to determine what you can do to not code switch, to live in your integrity, I do have 3 great tips for you to look out for now. And a couple of them I heard already today is mentioned. Number 1, build your personal team right now. I was sitting in a room with Wayne Sutton and a number of other Black leaders in tech talking about mental health. And one of the gentlemen said this, and it changed my life. He said, look, I've got people around me that take care of me. I don't go to my friend or my romantic partner for everything. I have people in my life for everything. So I personally have a therapist. I have an executive coach. I have an accountability service just to make sure I'm focusing on my top goals every single week. I have a chiropractor because I like that. And I have other folks in my life that help buffer me and that help support me. So number 1, build your personal team of people that are going to help and support you. Pro tip, try to make as many of them Black as possible. It will pay off in the long run. Number 2, do your own education. There has never been a more important time to make sure that you've done your own work on equity. From what happened in 1619, a project there, to civil rights movement, to the so-called world of drugs and mass incarceration of the 80s and 90s, to the current racial reckoning that we're in right now. If you as a leader up and coming don't fully understand the root causes of oppression that we face as Black folks, you'll inadvertently slip when it gets tough. And the third piece is determine your own North Star. Where's your line in the sand? Where are you not willing to change who you are as a Black person or as a brown person to assimilate or to make other folks feel comfortable? Where do you decide that you want to speak out against injustice around you? Who are the people and organizations that you will work with and won't? For all of us, it's different. But if you understand yours, you won't find yourself in the situation that I've been in, where you move that line in order to make someone else be comfortable. Because at the end of the day, it actually doesn't help you nor them to live outside of your authenticity. So thank you very much for participating, for listening for just a few moments. Please reach out to me, especially Black folks that want to engage, connect, and grow. And I hope that you will find a way into your integrity and not find yourself coached for the benefit of other people. Thank you.